Boldwood presents White Tiger, written by Andrew Warren and read by Jeff Harding. Chapter 1. Tokyo, Japan. Family, the man in the blue kimono said. We Yakuza are many things. Warriors, criminals, outlaws. But we are, above all other things, a family. Koichi Ogawa, Oyabun of the Yoshizawa clan, contemplated the small stone bowl in his withered hands. The chawan was handcrafted, its depth and circumference calculated to ensure the steaming matcha tea within did not cool too rapidly in the cold winter air. The vessel was formed from a rough black ceramic. According to Tetsuo, his wakagashira, second in command, it was over 400 years old. Its history stretched back to the Edo period, when Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate. At some point in its long-storied existence, the bowl had shattered. Whoever had patched it back together had filled in the cracks with thick gold lacquer. The shimmering lines of gold rippled through the stoneware like veins. The bowl's imperfections made it beautiful, unique. Like a fractured bone, long since healed, it was stronger along the break. When we quarrel, we must always remember that strife divides us, Koichi continued. For the Yakuza, for our family, times are not what they once were. Our numbers are dwindling. We are stronger when we join together. Koichi set the bowl back on the table. Tetsuo Mori, the younger man standing beside him, stiffened, and Koichi heard him suck in his breath. He realized he had committed a faux pas by not drinking the tea before setting down the bowl. He looked at the heavy-set man sitting across the table from him. Koichi's lips curled into a grin. What do I know about tea ceremonies, eh? I came into this life kicking over TUC shops behind pachinko parlors. I was a punk, fighting other punks in the street. Turf wars and gang feuds. He gestured to the scented smoke wafting from an incense stick at the far side of the low flat table between them. Tetsuo tells me this incense is ega wood. It's supposed to be mild, so as not to interfere with our appreciation of the tea. Koichi shrugged. I can barely smell it. The smells I associate with our life are beer, cigarettes, cheap perfume, and expensive whiskey. And, sad to say, blood. Spilled blood has a very particular scent. Once you've smelled it. His voice trailed off. Across from him, Goro Watanabe shifted his weight and grunted. Ogawa-san, he said, his voice deep and guttural. We come from the same place, the streets. The Yakuza is our only home, the only place we belong. As you say, our family. Of late, our clans have been enemies, but it was not always so. This ceremony, this beautiful tea house. He gestured with one hand at the lacquered wood walls and paper screens surrounding them. This is a strange place for men such as us to meet, but it is beautiful all the same. The Nakajima no Ochaya tea house sat on a small island in the middle of the Hamarikyu Gardens, a green oasis at the center of Tokyo's urban labyrinth. The building's interior was made of wood, and soft tatami mats covered the floor. Behind Goro, ripples in a vast tidal pond lapped against the rocks. The pond's water flowed from Tokyo Bay, and sluice gates controlled the water level year-round. Still, we are here for a purpose, Goro continued. The men who raided your warehouse in Kyoto belong to my organization. They acted on their own, out of greed and stupidity. Goro sighed and glanced up at Koichi. A new Oyabun has seized power in the Kodakai clan up north. Koichi squinted at the man sitting across from him. I've heard rumors. A power struggle in Sapporo. More bloodshed. Who is this new Oyabun? The heavy-set man shook his head. I have not met him. No one has. He operates behind the scenes, using underlings to carry out his orders. But under his leadership, the Kodakai have turned to human trafficking. They have seized ports, pressured contacts in the shipping industry. Their activity has cut into my smuggling operation. And as profits shrink, my men grow desperate. I see, Koichi said, his brow furrowing deeper. So that's why they tried to move on my territory. Goro nodded. I did not order them to do so, but they are my men, my responsibility. They will be dealt with. Of that you have my word. Now all that remains is Yubitsume, the obligation I must fulfill to prevent further bloodshed. He set his hand on the table. The pinky finger of his left hand was missing, severed at the second joint. The wound had long since healed over, and only a fleshy nub remained. Goro's second-in-command bowed and set a small fabric-wrapped bundle on the table. The heavy-set man unwrapped the crimson square of cloth, revealing a tanto knife within its folds. The straight steel blade shimmered in the warm glow of the hanging rice paper lanterns. Goro picked up the knife and took a deep breath. He placed the blade over the first joint of his ring finger. Koichi frowned. His bushy white eyebrows tilted towards each other, and a sea of wrinkles creased his forehead. He glanced down at his own left hand. It, too, was missing most of its pinky finger. He shook his head and raised his hand. The heavy-set man paused and stared back at him. Goro, Koichi said, I think tonight I prefer the scent of agar wood to that of blood. Let us enjoy these beautiful surroundings, the cool night air, and this delicious tea. The point of the Yubitsume is to prove that without our brothers, without our family, we are weaker. Strength lies in unity. But we are old enough to have learned this lesson many times over. I would like you to consider reuniting with our clan, ending this fracture and the strife that comes along with it. Promise me you will consider my proposal. That is all the obligation I ask. Goro Watanabe set the knife down, then leaned back. He pursed his lips and stared into Koichi's dark sunken eyes. The kobun, the underlings surrounding them, tensed. The air was still, and for a moment the only sound was the water outside, slapping against the wood pilings of the tea-house's deck. Goro nodded. I will give this my utmost consideration. You have my word. Goro bowed his head. Koichi bowed as well, but not as low as Goro. The Yoshizawa clan was larger, more powerful than Goro's faction. All right then, Koichi said with a smile. He glanced up at Tetsuo. Now, let's drink some tea. Tetsuo sighed and shook his head. Koichi laughed. Since when did young punks like these worry so much about following rules? He asked. Goro chuckled. Koichi picked up the chawan of steaming tea once again. I'll do my best not to upset our sensitive younger brothers anymore. Let's see if I can remember how this goes. He held the bowl in both hands, then turned it until the front faced Goro. He brought the bowl to his lips and took a long sip. Then he set the bowl down. Koichi gave a brief bow to Goro, then turned to the tea master, a matronly woman dressed in a simple white kimono. He bowed to her. Ganpeki deshita, he said. That was perfect. As the host of the ceremony, only he was allowed to comment on the tea. The woman returned his bow, lowering her head even farther than Goro. She took the bowl and cleaned it. She refilled the bottom with matcha powder, then ladled in hot water. After frothing the tea with a bamboo whisk, she placed the bowl before Goro, bowed to both men, then stepped away from the table. Goro lifted the bowl in both hands and inhaled the scent of the tea. As he wafted the steam to his nose with one hand, Koichi frowned. A cold breeze blew through the ancient tea house, carrying with it a sound, the buzzing whine of a distant motor. Peering over Goro's shoulder, he saw the tidal pond's waters beyond the railing of the outer deck. Dark and deep, the black pool extended into the shadows. In the distance, he could just barely make out the garden's trees, their snow-laden branches bending down to kiss the water's surface. As Goro sipped his tea, the noise grew louder. A silvery wake rippled across the pond's surface. A boat of some kind skimmed over the water, moving towards the tea house's deck. Koichi gestured to Tetsuo. The younger man leaned in closer. "Is that the water taxi?" Koichi grunted. "I thought they closed down after dark." Goro narrowed his eyes and stopped drinking. He set the chawan down and turned. The boat sped closer. A second watercraft darted behind it, moving parallel to the first. The sounds of muffled shouts came from outside the front entrance. Although the tea house was normally open to visitors in the winter months, Tetsuo had booked out the entire venue for the sit-down between Koichi and Goro, and at any rate the hour was well past closing. Tetsuo pulled a cell phone from his pocket and dialed a number. As he waited for an answer, he headed toward the front entrance of the tea house. Koichi narrowed his eyes. The boats moved closer, running parallel to the tea house. With a loud sputter, their motors came to a stop, and they drifted sideways towards the outer deck. 3 men in heavy black puffer jackets sat in each of the small watercraft. They stood up as the boats floated closer. Each man carried a Howa Type 89 assault rifle in a 2-handed grip. They raised their weapons, aiming them at the tea house. "Get down!" Koichi shouted. He reached out to Goro, but before he could grab the man, one of his kobun tackled him to the ground. The flash of muzzle fire reflected across the black water, lighting up the fog-shrouded night. Gunfire screamed through the tea house, accompanied by the tinkle of shattering glass. A stray bullet smashed through the teapot on the table. Koichi winced as boiling water splashed across his skin. A woman's scream pierced the air. Koichi looked up and saw the tea master hit the floor a few feet away. A dark pool seeped beneath her body, turning the tatami mats beneath her crimson. "Goro!" he shouted. "Is he—" Before Koichi could finish his sentence, he heard a strangled cry from across the table. Goro struck the ground with a loud thud. His men returned fire. The wood beams overhead splintered, and a shower of fine dust filled the air, like snow on a calm winter's eve. One of Koichi's men flipped the table over, sending the remains of the teapot and the delicate chawan bowl crashing to the ground. From the corner of his eye, Koichi saw the ancient vessel shatter once more. The pieces of crockery skittered across the floor. Koichi crawled across the tatami mats. Gunfire thundered above, and he heard shouts from the front entrance. Whoever had attacked them was flanking both his and Goro's men, attacking from the water and the land at the same time. More glass shattered. Footsteps thudded across the outer deck. From his vantage point on the floor, Koichi couldn't see what was happening, but he could guess that the men from the boats had climbed up onto one of the wood bridges connecting the island to the garden and were now storming the tea house. He grabbed a discarded pistol, then he fell across a bloody corpse lying on the floor. He froze, lying still. The footsteps moved toward him. More gunfire echoed in the distance. "Are wakare desu ka?" a voice said. Is that him? Koichi felt a boot prod his shoulder. The foot flipped him over. He sprawled across the tatami mats, eyes closed, chest stained with another man's blood. Two of the men from the boat stood over him, cradling their weapons in their arms. "Aye," one of the men said. "He's dead. Let's finish here and—" Koichi's eyes snapped open and his lips curled into a snarl. His pistol roared twice. A crimson hole exploded in the nearest thug's forehead. The man's muscles went limp and he collapsed to the floor. Koichi was already firing again, sending a double tap into the other man's chest. The man tumbled beside his comrade, his breath a rasping wheeze. Koichi staggered to his feet and aimed his gun at the man's head. "Fucking amateurs," he muttered. He pulled the trigger. A fine red mist spattered his kimono. From the corner of his eye, Koichi saw another of the armed men in the puffer jacket spin towards him, aiming his rifle. Koichi gave him a defiant stare. He did not bother raising his pistol. He knew he would not be able to fire in time. He spat on the ground and grinned. Bang! A crimson stain exploded across the man's coat. He fell to the ground as one of Koichi's men raced across the tea house. It was Junko Fujioka, a new member of the gang. Koichi stared at the young man in shock as Junko traded gunfire with another assailant on the outer deck. "Oyabun, we must leave!" Junko shouted. "The tea house is overrun!" The young gangster grabbed Koichi's arm and dragged him towards the kitchen. As the old man staggered beside him, he looked into Junko's face. He knew the man was in his 20s, but to Koichi, he had the face of a teenager. As Koichi limped through the tea house's kitchen, Junko ejected the spent magazine from his pistol and reloaded. The slide snapped back with a loud click as they approached the metal doors leading out of the kitchen. "Some of these Rokodeneshi infiltrated the garden grounds," Junko said, breathing hard. "They disguise themselves as the ground staff." "Who are they?" Koichi demanded. Junko kicked open the door and peered out into the darkness. "I thought they were with Goro," he whispered. "The whole sit-down must have been a trap." "No," Koichi said, shaking his head. "They killed Goro and his men too." The two of them staggered onto a walkway outside. Muted gunfire echoed from the rear of the tea house near the water. Koichi followed behind Junko as the young man led them around the side towards one of the curved wooden bridges. Across the bridge, a black sedan was parked on the grass next to a dirt trail. Two armed men took cover behind the vehicle, exchanging fire with a trio of gunmen on the bridge. Koichi watched as one of the attackers dropped his rifle and tumbled over the guardrail. His body struck the water with a loud splash. "You ready, Oyobun?" Junko asked. Koichi gave the young man a sly grin. "Don't wait for me, kid. I'll keep up." Junko stalked towards the bridge, pistol raised in a two-handed grip. He sent a double tap into the nearest attacker. Koichi fired as well, taking down the remaining enemy. As they crossed the bridge, Koichi braced himself on the guardrail, panting to catch his breath. He heard a low gurgle from a body on the bridge. The man he had shot wasn't dead. Kneeling, he grabbed the wounded thug by the collar of his jacket and jerked him to a sitting position. "Who sent you?" he demanded. He slammed his pistol butt into the dying man's face. "Come on, you goddamn sewer rat! Talk, or you get another round in the belly!" Junko spun around. More intruders were marching from the tea house, heading for the bridge. "Oyabun!" he shouted. "We have to go!" "Guess this is your lucky day," Koichi whispered to the dying man. He shoved the barrel of the pistol under the man's chin and pulled the trigger. Koichi followed Junko to the car. But before they could finish crossing the curved wooden bridge to safety, one of the bodies ahead of them stirred. Junko lowered his pistol and fired. The prone man groaned and flung out his arm. A tiny black sphere fell from his hand and rolled toward them. Junko's eyes opened wide and his face turned pale. He spun around, blocking Koichi's body with his own. "Oyabun!" he shouted. "Get down! It—" A thundering explosion drowned out the younger man's words. Blinding light engulfed Koichi's vision, and a wave of hot air blasted across his skin. He felt Junko's body slam into his own, and the two of them tumbled over the railing of the bridge. Koichi hit the water with a loud splash. His body went limp, and he sank beneath the shimmering black surface. Burning slivers of wood rained across the water, hissing as they sank through the inky black void. The old man closed his eyes. At first, he thought he smelled the soothing agar wood incense. But it was only a dream. Stray neurons firing as his oxygen-deprived brain shut down. Cold darkness engulfed him, and he sank deeper and deeper into the shadows. Chapter 2. Seoul, South Korea. Gangnam District, 24 hours later. Thomas Caine couldn't say exactly why, but he was certain of one thing. The man sitting alone at the Octagon Club was a killer. The man was Korean, handsome, and well-dressed. He drank whiskey, neat, from a highball glass. Sweeping spotlights lit his face with a neon glow, shifting from crimson to green and blue. Caine watched the man from the corner of his eye. The thumping beat of the club's music drowned out the surrounding chatter. They were both sitting in the VIP area above the main stage and the crowded dance floor. A row of padded white bench seats ran along either wall, and a railing gave them each a view of the VIP boxes on the level below them. The foam-covered waters of a small swimming pool filled the floor between the VIP booths. The club's swirling lights shimmered off the pool's surface. Bikini-clad dancers splashed in the water, twirling their live bodies to the thumping beat of K-pop. The man ignored the women in the pool and kept his attention on the VIP boxes surrounding it. As he drained the last drops of amber liquid from his glass, a cocktail waitress stopped by and set a fresh drink down on the table in front of his bench. The man smiled and chatted with her, but Caine could not hear what he said over the music. The waitress responded with a smile and laughter. She seemed at ease in his presence. It was a cold February night, and the man wore clothes suited for the weather. His olive suede jacket covered a gray turtleneck sweater. Dark indigo jeans and black leather Chelsea boots completed the outfit. They looked expensive, as did the gold watch dangling from his left wrist. Caine had spent years working in the field with assassins and cutthroats of all kinds. Soldiers, snipers, guns for hire. Women and men who seduced their targets, then slid a knife into their lovers' backs before their lips even parted. He was no stranger to the ways of death. Blood stained his own hands as well. But just what it was about the man at the bar that tipped him off, he couldn't say. He simply knew on an instinctual level that this man was, like him, a killer. Caine had learned long ago to trust his instincts. The faint tingle on the back of his neck, a sixth sense for danger, honed over years in the field, surviving one deadly mission after another. He would not ignore them now. His emerald green eyes focused on the VIP box the man was watching on the level below, the same box Caine and his female partner were surveilling. Behind the glass walls, a group of men, all wearing business suits, sat at a long table. Chan Tai-young, a director at Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, stood at the head of the table. The other men laughed and shouted as the waitress cleared away empty glasses and plates. Another cocktail waitress deposited a fresh tray of green soju bottles on the table and began pouring drinks. Most of the men appeared to be in their late 20s and early 30s, but Chan was older. Caine knew the man was in his 50s, though he seemed fit for his age. He wore glasses and had a mild-mannered look about him. He seemed a bit out of place in the chic modern nightclub. Chan straightened his tie, then raised his glass. "Wago haramdaon narul viejo," he shouted. It was a common Korean toast, meaning to elegance and beauty. The other businessman returned the toast, then downed their shots of clear, sweet soju. One of them grabbed the server's waist and cackled like a hyena. She swatted his hands away, an annoyed grimace on her face. Pulling free from his grasp, she left the table and sauntered to the bar at the far end of the room. Shifting in his seat, Caine leaned closer to the attractive Korean woman sitting across from him. She wore a shimmering silver cocktail dress, and the dark roots of her hair showed through her blonde dye job. Her eyes scanned the lower level, watching the men, then moving across the rest of the crowd. "Chen has a shadow," Caine whispered into the woman's ear.
"Hello,"
she replied, her dark eyes sweeping over the crowd.
"Green jacket, on your 6.
"Have you seen him before?" he asked. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Raising her hand, she caressed his hair, and her lips touched his neck.
"아닙니다,"
she murmured.
"Negative. Let me get a closer look."
Fishing around in her gaping Louis Vuitton purse, she removed a Samsung cell phone in a pink rhinestone case.
"야, 질하지 마,"
she shouted.
"Don't be so lame. Drink up."
Sumi Bai was 32 years old, and based on her file, Caine knew she was a highly trained agent of South Korea's National Intelligence Service. But in her club attire and heavy makeup, she could easily pass for 10 years younger. She swayed and giggled like any other drunk patron at one of Gangnam's exclusive clubs and bars. But Caine knew it was all an act. Still, he couldn't help but be surprised when the attractive woman sashayed from her seat, then deposited herself into his lap. Throwing his arm around her, he stopped her from hitting the table. Laughing, she raised her phone and made a V symbol with her fingers.
"Selfie time,"
she said, slurring her words. She planted a kiss on his cheek as she took several photos of them. Caine smiled for the camera, then shot a glance at the booth behind them. The man in the green coat narrowed his eyes, watching them as Sumi threw her arms around Caine's neck. He returned the embrace, and her lips brushed against his. "I think he made us," Caine whispered. Sumi shrugged.
"Maybe. Or maybe you're just too stiff to enjoy yourself."
"I know how to work a cover," he replied.
"Could have fooled me,"
she said, peering into his eyes.
"You married? Trust me, you're not my type, but I've had worse assignments."
Caine didn't reply. Deep down, he knew her words stung because she was right. He had worked undercover in similar situations many times before, but now his feigned intimacy with the attractive young woman felt forced, awkward. "To sell your cover, you have to believe your cover," Caine thought. "Live the lie until it becomes the truth." His on-again, off-again relationship with Rebecca Freeling, director of the CIA's National Clandestine Service, was finally back on track. And for Caine, his feelings for Rebecca made his performance with Sumi feel even more contrived by comparison. The NIS operative climbed off his lap and raised her empty glass, flagging down a waitress.
"여기요, hey!"
As the waitress hurried back, Sumi glanced over her shoulder. The man in the green jacket had returned his attention to the VIP booth below.
"I don't think he's paying attention to us,"
she whispered to Caine.
"He's focused on Chan."
Caine ordered another round of drinks from the waitress as Sumi flipped through the pictures she had taken. Once she found a clear angle on the man behind them, she texted the photo to a contact on her phone.
"I sent his picture to NIS,"
she said after the waitress left.
"They'll run facial recognition on him."
Caine returned his attention to the glass booth below. A woman climbed up from the pool, water dripping from her sleek, pale body. Caine shifted his gaze as she crossed his path, keeping his eyes on Chan in the VIP booth below. He was standing, retrieving his credit card from one of the cocktail waitresses. The other men were still drinking, and he slapped one of them on the back.
"Looks like the party's over,"
Sumi said, leaning her head on Caine's shoulder. "Not for Chan," Caine replied. "His night's just beginning." Sumi's phone beeped. She frowned as she read a new text message.
"Subject unknown,"
she said.
No match to any known North Korean operatives on file. Other intelligence agencies are negative as well.
Caine narrowed his eyes as Chan left the VIP box. The man in the green jacket threw some wand notes on the table to cover his tab, then headed for the elevator leading down to the first floor. Caine tapped the concealed earpiece microphone hidden within his right ear. "All units, this is Blackbird 1. Magpie is on the move. Be advised, potential hostile in field." "Copy that," a voice crackled back. "Do we abort?" Caine thought for a moment, watching as Chan Tai-young took the stairs down to the dance floor. Chan's position at the ministry gave him access to high-level economic intel and access to South Korea's military intellectual property, as well as any trade secrets the U.S. shared with their Korean allies. The man was respected and well-liked by his peers. He had a family, a wife and 2 daughters, and a comfortable house. Unfortunately, Chan Tai-young was a North Korean spy. For nearly a decade, Chan, or whatever his real name was, had maintained his cover, worming deeper and deeper into the country's military-industrial complex. On paper, he lived a quiet, unremarkable life. His North Korean handlers made sure he kept as low of a profile as possible, activating him only for matters of utmost importance. But after one too many meetings with his foreign masters in Cambodia, usually coinciding with trade conferences of some sort, Chan fell into a CIA honey trap. An asset posing as a sex worker recorded Chan debriefing high-level members of North Korea's Reconnaissance General Bureau, the country's foreign intelligence service. It was the latest in a string of setbacks for South Korea's beleaguered intelligence community. The CIA offered to expose the mole hiding within their government in exchange for being allowed first crack at Chan and the secrets he could expose. Caine had been chosen to run the extraordinary rendition, essentially a government-sanctioned kidnapping. The intel Chan could provide on North Korea and their network of deep cover assets could be invaluable, and Caine was certain it was only a matter of time before Chan or his handlers realized he had been discovered, which might explain why an assassin was also shadowing Chan on this cold February night. Caine watched as the man in the green jacket stepped into the elevator. The lights bathed his face in a kaleidoscopic array of colors once more. Then they swung away, leaving him a shadowy silhouette. The elevator doors closed. Caine made his decision. "Stand by," he replied. "Blackbird 2, stick with Magpie. I'm on the hostile. Operation Empty Nest is a go." Chapter 3. After taking the stairs to the ground floor, Caine and Sue-Mi shoved their way through a sea of dancing bodies. True to its name, the club was octagon-shaped, with a stage at the north side of the building. A DJ stood on the raised platform, mixing beats between popular K-pop songs as colorful spotlights swept across the crowd. Caine squinted, struggling to see the edges of the club through the mass of dancing bodies. An older Caucasian male like himself fit in reasonably well up in the quieter VIP section, but down here, surrounded by young laughing faces, he knew he stuck out like a sore thumb. Sue-Mi, on the other hand, fit in perfectly. A young man in torn blue jeans and a leather jacket grabbed her and began grinding on her leg. The NIS agent shoved him aside and continued scanning the crowd.
"Chan's at the coat check,"
she said, watching as an attendant handed the older man a black overcoat. As the spotlight swung over the crowd again, Caine saw the elevator doors open at the far end of the club. The man in the green jacket exited the elevator. He shot a quick glance at the main doors, then turned and headed for the rear of the building. "Stay on Chan," Caine replied, never taking his eyes off his quarry. "I'll contact you shortly."
"Copy that,"
Sue-Mi replied. She broke away from Caine and danced through the crowd, her metallic dress shimmering in the lights as she made her way to the front of the club. Caine shoved a swaying youth aside and headed for the edge of the dance floor. As he broke free from the crowd, he saw the man in the green jacket duck out a side door. Caine followed, pausing at the door for a few seconds before he opened it. A frigid blast of wind slashed across his cheeks as he stepped into a wide alley. Traffic roared down Nonhyun-ro, one of the major roads connecting Gangnam-gu to the other residential areas nearby. Caine spotted the man a few yards down the alley, heading west past the flashing purple lights of a 24-hour bowling alley. A group of giggling girls wearing long puffer jackets over their cocktail dresses ran down the alley, heading towards the Octagon Club's entrance. Caine flipped up the collar of his navy peacoat and stuck his hands in the front pockets. Hunching his shoulders to ward off the bitter chill, he followed the man down the alley, keeping his distance. The ground beneath his feet was slick with ice, and scattered clumps of gray snow dotted the ground. It had been over a week since the last snowfall, but the freezing temperatures had prevented the filthy residue from melting away. The man turned left on Bongansa-ro, a street named after the famous Bongansa Temple. It was said that on a clear day, one could see the temple and its towering Buddha statue from the end of the street. But on this cold, windy night, Caine saw only clouds and the blinking lights of traffic in the darkness ahead. Taxis wove through the traffic on the congested street. The man in the green jacket raised his arm, and an orange sedan with yellow stripes pulled over. Caine did likewise, keeping his eyes on his target as a similar sedan, this one white and green, darted to the curb. Caine slid into the back seat just as the other taxi pulled away. He handed his driver a thick wad of Korean won notes. "I need you to follow that orange cab," he said in a low voice. "Try to keep your distance. Stay 3 car lengths back." The driver adjusted his glasses and gave Caine a confused look. "영이요, 없음," he said. No English. Caine pointed out the windshield and said, "윤양가세요. 세워들려요. Just go. Hurry." The driver slipped the folded bills into his vest pocket with a sigh and pulled away from the curb. As they merged with the local traffic, Caine leaned forward, keeping his eyes on the other vehicle. He tapped his earpiece. "Magpie 2, status report," he whispered. The driver's eyes glanced at him in the rearview mirror, but he continued maneuvering the cab through the traffic in silence.
Magpie 2, copy,
Sumi replied, her voice crackling in his ear.
Chan left the club. He texted Lee Seoul. Right on cue.
Caine watched as the red taillights up ahead veered left past a blinking LG billboard. Caine tapped the driver's shoulder. "Left here," he said, gesturing with his hands. The driver muttered a curse in Korean, but Caine felt the sedan shudder as the engine roared louder. They sped through the intersection, beating the red light by a matter of seconds. Caine struggled to spot the other taxi in the sea of blinking taillights. "Magpie 3, he said, his eyes scanning the cars ahead of him. "Are you in position?" "준비됐어요," the man's voice replied through his earpiece. "Good to go." Caine recognized the voice as Jae-yoon, the third member of his team. He clenched his fist as the taxi swerved around a delivery truck. The orange cab turned left again. Caine tapped the driver on the shoulder and pointed left. The car's brakes screeched as the driver spun the wheel. So much for not attracting attention, Caine thought. For a moment, he debated calling off the operation. The plan was simple. After discovering Chan's indiscretions in Cambodia, the NIS had kept him under tight surveillance, and soon discovered the man's sexual appetites at home were no less voracious. Despite South Korea's recent crackdowns on prostitution, the country's billion-dollar sex industry continued to thrive, rivaling red light districts in countries like Japan and the Netherlands. When the police raided a brothel or massage parlor in Hongdae, it simply closed shop and moved to Itaewon or some other area. And many sex workers had moved their operations to online systems, booking clients through anonymous web portals. When the NIS discovered Chan's infatuation with an online escort named Lee Seoul, they brought her in for questioning. Once they offered to turn a blind eye to her illegal activities, it was a simple matter to recruit the woman as an asset. Chan was a creature of habit, and he usually contacted Lee for a rendezvous on Thursday nights, after holding a business meeting with his department. Tonight was Thursday, and Chan's late-night meeting wrapped up at 10:30 p.m., just as it always did. Like clockwork, Chan had set up an appointment with Lee. They would rendezvous at a love hotel near the club. But tonight, Chan would get more than he bargained for. Unless Caine called off the op. He tapped his earpiece again as the driver swerved around a delivery van. The orange taxi was still several cars ahead of them. Magpie 3, stand by. Magpie 2, contact operations. Are you people running a B team here? Could this guy be working for you?
Anio,
She answered back.
No, I already checked. And Chan's car just arrived on site. He's getting out and approaching the hotel.
Caine debated whether he believed her. It was always possible the NIS wasn't happy with the CIA's deal. Maybe they were trying to pull a double cross and grab Chan before his team moved in. Then why is this guy driving away from the operations site? The NIS know exactly where Chan is heading. Caine paused. All his instincts told him that the man he was following was an enemy, a hostile operative, which meant if they missed their chance to grab Chan tonight, they might not get another one.
Do we abort?
Sumi asked, her voice a cool monotone. Negative, Caine replied. Maintain radio silence until you have Chan in custody. Up ahead, the orange taxi pulled over on Gangnam-dero, a popular shopping street lined with stores and cafes. Neon signs hung over a crowd of pedestrians, advertising international brands like New Balance, Prada, Godiva chocolates, and more. Caine tapped his driver on the shoulder. Pull over. The driver grunted in response, then turned the wheel. The cab slid up to the curb about 20 meters behind the other taxi. Caine waited a few moments, watching as the man in the green jacket paid his driver and exited the vehicle. He walked down the street, glancing at the flashing signs overhead. Caine exited the taxi. The driver rolled down the window, waving Caine's change and calling out to him. Like many Asian countries, tipping was not a common custom in Korea. Some considered it rude. But Caine had no time for social niceties. Instead, he plunged into the crowd, following his quarry through the neon maze of shops. The man in the green jacket shoved his way through a trio of young women drinking coffee from steaming Starbucks cups. One girl's drink spilled on the sidewalk. She shouted after him, her breath misting in the chilly night air. Yagasaki! Hey, asshole! The man ignored her and ducked into a large store underneath a glowing yellow sign. Caine peered through the towering glass windows. The store sold a variety of toys and accessories based on a series of online chat characters. Caine wasn't familiar with them, but they certainly seemed popular with the local crowd. The shimmering glass and steel edifice took up the first 3 floors of the sleek modern office building. Clear plastic racks of merchandise filled each level of the store, and a mob of Koreans in their teens and 20s meandered through the shelves, grabbing plush dolls and clipping dangling charms to their cell phone cases. Caine entered the store and walked past a plastic statue of a smiling blue cat. The sculpture was about Caine's height. He ducked behind it, then sauntered along the store's outer perimeter. Keeping an eye on his quarry, he grabbed a yellow stuffed animal from a display case and pretended to check the price tag. Cheerful music played through the store, barely audible beneath the chattering of the other shoppers. An escalator led up to the store's second level, but the man in the green jacket remained on the ground floor. He walked past a rack of backpacks and tote bags, each one adorned with the smiling face of a different animal character.
도와드릴까요?
A soft, lilting voice asked. Caine turned and saw a salesgirl approaching him. She wore a black t-shirt featuring the same blue cat from the entrance and held another yellow stuffed animal in her arms.
May I help you? Are you shopping for yourself?
Caine smiled. No, I'm looking for my niece. But I'm not sure if she'll like this one. Is it a bear? The clerk waggled the toy she was holding in Caine's face and made a roaring sound. Caine ignored her, watching as the man in the green jacket moved closer to the rear of the store.
No, silly,
she said, laughing.
It's a lion.
Of course. It's perfect. Caine handed her the doll. I'll take 5. Can you gift wrap them, please? The woman beamed at him as she gathered up 3 more dolls from the rack.
Wow, You have a lot of nieces.
I'm going to keep looking around, Caine said, heading toward the back of the store. He glanced left and right, but saw no sign of the man he was following. Damn, he thought, I lost him. As he scanned the store, he glimpsed movement from the corner of his eye. A metal door next to the front counter hung open. A security guard shuffled out from behind the counter and moved towards the door. As Caine passed the counter, the guard reached out, grabbing his arm. "Excuse me," he said, raising his hand. "That area is off." A loud noise echoed through the store, cutting the man off. He turned and looked at the door. The other patrons in the store froze. The sound was muffled, but Caine recognized it at once. It was a pistol shot. Cheerful music played over the store's speakers, a surreal contrast to the panicked expression on the crowd's faces. A few of them set down their merchandise and headed for the front doors. Caine twisted his arm free from the guard's feeble grip. Pivoting his body, he shoved the man away, causing him to stumble backwards. Then he reached up, grabbed the striped handle of a fire alarm next to the door, and yanked it down. Panic surged through the crowd. They headed for the store's exit en masse. The alarm's high-pitched wail drowned out the music and the crowd's screams. As the guard caught his balance, Caine nodded towards the checkout staff, who stood frozen in fear behind the front counter. "Get these people out of here," Caine said, "then call the police." Without waiting for a reply, he reached behind his back and drew a small pistol from a concealed holster. The NIS standard-issue sidearm was the Beretta PX-4 Storm, a weapon with which Caine was intimately familiar. Although they had balked at first, Rebecca had insisted that Caine be allowed to carry the firearm on the mission, despite the fact that he was a foreign agent. Holding the weapon in a two-handed grip, Caine stalked through the door, then kicked it closed behind him. He found himself in a large stockroom. The walls and floors were bare concrete, and towering metal shelves ran through the center of the cavernous chamber. Loose toys and boxes of merchandise filled the shelves. Fluorescent lights hung above, bathing the room in an industrial green glow. Caine grabbed a chair and wedged it under the door handle, preventing anyone outside from gaining entrance. Before Caine could take another step, two loud coughs echoed off the concrete walls. Caine ducked as bullets ricocheted off the door behind him. As he crouched behind a table near the entrance, he heard a loud thunk, followed by a low hum. The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. Chapter 4. Caine didn't wait for his eyes to adjust to the sudden change in lighting. He dropped to the ground and rolled behind one of the towering shelves. Bullets tore into the storeroom's concrete walls. There was no muzzle flash. Caine couldn't see where the shots came from, but he knew his attacker was hiding somewhere among the shelves. Must be using a suppressor, Caine thought, masked the muzzle flash. A split second later, the hum of a generator kicked in. Emergency lights glowed above, breaking up the shadows with pools of amber light. Caine stalked between the shelves, silent as a jungle cat. He paused as he reached the end of a rack, listening for his enemy's movements. He heard the patter of footsteps scuffling through the room. But between the droning fire alarm and the generator's hum, he couldn't pinpoint where the sound was coming from. Caine swung out from behind the shelves and aimed his pistol down the gap between the rows. There was no sign of his opponent in the narrow circle of light. As he moved along the shelves, he spotted a dark mass crumpled on the floor, partially lit by the emergency lights overhead. Ducking into a low crouch, Caine peered down the row. All clear. He advanced toward the dark shape. As he suspected, it was a body. A young Korean man in his early 20s lay on the ground, surrounded by a pool of sticky blood. In the dim orange light, Caine could just make out the cartoon characters adorning the man's black T-shirt. Store employee, Caine thought, probably got in this guy's way, tried to stop him. Before Caine could check for a pulse, more gunshots erupted from the darkness. Despite the man's suppressor, the loud coughs echoed off the storeroom's concrete walls. Bullets tore through a cardboard box above Caine's head, showering him with bits of fabric and white stuffing. Caine moved down the row, pausing next to a cargo dolly stacked with boxes and plastic bags. He reached up and shoved a stack of wind-up toys aside, As he cleared the shelf, he spotted a shadowy figure moving a few rows down. Caine opened fire. Muzzle flash from his pistol lit up his face. Bullets sparked off the metal shelves in the distance. Footsteps echoed in the shadows. Caine reversed course, moving away from the dolly and back toward the body on the floor. His enemy fired again, tearing holes in a large stuffed animal a few feet away. Caine returned fire, aiming through the gaps in the shelves. Squinting as his gun flashed, he glimpsed the man's green coat darting behind another row. Caine adjusted his aim and fired again. He heard a low gasp, and the footsteps stopped. "Gotcha, you son of a..." Before he could finish the thought, a metallic creak echoed through the room, followed by a loud crash. Plastic toys and cardboard boxes tumbled to the floor as the shelves ahead of him toppled like dominoes. As the shelf above him teetered, Caine sprinted toward the cargo dolly. Leaping into the air, he crashed down onto the wheeled platform. His momentum sent the dolly rolling across the smooth concrete floor. He sped into the center of the room just as the rack of shelves behind him struck the ground with a deafening crash. The man in the green jacket limped out from behind another collapsed shelf and opened fire. But he aimed high, and his bullets flew above Caine as he rolled across the floor. As he sped behind another rack of shelves on the opposite side of the room, Caine tumbled off the dolly. It continued on its way, slamming into the wall with a loud crash and tipping over on its side. 3 more gunshots rang out. Bullets tore chunks of concrete from the wall above the crashed dolly. As footsteps stalked toward his position, Caine glanced left and right, unsure which way to run. Then he looked up. Jamming his pistol in his waistband, he climbed up the shelving rack. His ascent knocked stuffed animals and wind-up toys to the floor. The plastic animal characters spun and gyrated on the concrete beneath him. The footsteps came closer. Caine gritted his teeth as he heaved himself onto the top shelf. The metal buckled beneath his weight, but it held. He could only hope the wailing alarm and generator noise would mask the creaking sound. Caine crouched on the shelf, watching as the man rounded the corner. The killer approached the dolly, kicking toys and cardboard boxes out of his way. The emergency lights cast flickering shadows on the wall, and Caine could tell by the dark outline that his assumption was correct. The man's pistol had a long, thick noise suppressor attached to the barrel. This guy is well equipped, and he's clearly been trained, Caine thought. Why didn't he run an SRD, a search and detection routine, on his way here? Why did he make himself so easy to follow? The man swung his pistol left and right, searching the surrounding racks for any sign of movement. Caine inched toward the edge of the shelf. He held his breath, listening for any creak or groan from the thin metal that might give away his position. The man shoved the dolly aside with a well-placed kick, aiming his pistol down the narrow space running between the wall and the shelves. Caine slowly drew his pistol from his waistband. Now or never. Caine pounced, leaping from the shelves and slamming into the man below. The impact drove the man forward, and he struck the concrete wall with a dull, fleshy thud. He struggled to spin around, but before he could get his bearings, Caine slammed the butt of his pistol into the man's skull. As he reeled from the blow, Caine drove his forearm into his opponent's neck, smashing his face back into the wall. A muffled cry of pain escaped the man's lips. Caine grabbed the wrist of his gun arm and jammed his thumb into the pressure point between his enemy's thumb and forefinger. A low grunt of pain echoed through the room as Caine increased the pressure, twisting the man's wrist until it snapped. The gun clattered to the floor as his fingers spasmed. Caine kicked the weapon behind him. The man ducked, struggling to break free from the wrist hold. Caine jerked his opponent's arm behind his back. The man yelped as Caine pushed his bones to their breaking point. Caine spun around, hurling the man away from the wall and into the shelves. He struck the rack with a metallic clang, sending boxes and toys spilling down around him. The man blinked, then shook his head, recovering quickly from the impact. He raised his fists and lunged towards Caine. But before he could strike, he found himself staring down the barrel of Caine's Beretta. He froze in place. "It's over," Caine snarled. "You want to live through this? Start talking." The man stared at Caine, relaxing his posture as he gasped for breath. His lips curled into a smile. Live? He spoke perfect English, with no trace of an accent. You are a fool. He spat blood on the floor between them. I'm already dead. Just like Chan, and just like your friends. Caine squinted as the emergency lights bathed them in a hellish glow. What are you? Before he could finish, the man screamed a war cry and charged at Caine, his hand held high. Caine reacted on instinct. His gun roared twice as he sent a double tap into his enemy's chest. The man ceased his mad lunge, jerking to a stop like a marionette with its strings pulled. He touched his chest with his free hand. It came away slick with blood. The dark dripping fluid looked black in the spinning orange lights. Then he collapsed to the ground. Caine rushed over to him and rolled the man onto his back. He examined the object clutched in the man's outstretched hand, expecting to find a weapon of some kind. But it was just a cell phone. Bastard wanted me to shoot him, Caine thought. 2 gaping holes pierced his chest near his heart. Blood ran down his shirt and soaked his clothes. The man's head lolled back, and his eyes fluttered closed. Caine slapped him across the face. The man blinked, then glared up at Caine. I can get you medical attention, Caine said. I can help you. Do you understand? The man did not respond. Caine grabbed a scrap of a towel from the pile of toppled merchandise, and the man gasped as Caine pressed the cloth against his wound, fighting to stop the blood loss. Who do you work for? Who sent you? Caine demanded. The man glanced up at him through half-lidded eyes. Defend unto death our strong and prosperous nation, he wheezed, and our glorious leader. His eyes closed and his head sagged. Caine slapped him again, but there was no response. He was dead. Caine grabbed the man's cell phone. Glancing at the screen, he confirmed the model used a fingerprint sensor beneath the screen to unlock. Like all such sensors, it used a capacitive field to detect the faint electrical signals generated by a living body. The finger of a dead hand would not open it. He had mere seconds before the electrical charge dissipated from the man's corpse. After tapping the unlock button, he grabbed the man's right thumb and pressed it against the sensor's glowing white circle. Nothing happened. The screen remained black. Muttering a curse, Caine tried the right forefinger, but again the phone failed to unlock. As the fire alarm wailed, Caine dropped the man's arm and grabbed his left hand. He pressed the thumb against the sensor. The phone emitted a soft beep, and the screen glowed to life. Caine stood and swiped his finger across the screen. The call log showed only a few calls from an unknown number. There were no texts or emails. Caine opened the photo app. The gallery was nearly empty, save for pictures of Chan Tai-young and his mistress, Lee Seoul-ah. As Caine continued swiping, he found pictures of Su-mi, Jai, and even himself. Checking the metadata, he saw the pictures were all sent weeks ago. This op was blown from the start, he thought. He wanted me to follow him, split us up, divide and conquer. Caine grabbed the man's pistol from the floor, then tapped his earpiece. This is Magpie 1. Empty nest is code red, he shouted. We're blown. Abort. I repeat, abort. Static crackled in his ear. There was no response. The fire alarm ceased its wailing. Caine heard radio chatter from outside. Jogging over to the door, he removed the chair wedged in place, then cracked it open and peered into the dimly lit store. The staff and customers had evacuated, and police cars gathered in the street. Their flashing red and blue lights reflected off the glass storefront. Caine backed away from the door, then ran towards a glowing exit sign in the far corner of the storeroom. Outside, the frigid air blasted him once again as he raced down an alley, heading for the next street over. He had to find a vehicle, get back to his team before whoever was watching them struck. But as his footsteps echoed down the frost-covered pavement, a cold, gnawing sensation grew in the pit of his stomach. He feared he was already too late. Chapter 5. The Hotel Strawberry sat on a quiet back street, away from the congestion and traffic of Nonhyun-ro. A getaway for couples looking to escape the watchful eyes of their families, the hotel was designed with privacy in mind. A towering black glass slab, every window was tinted, preventing pedestrians on the street from looking in. Brick walls surrounded the parking lot, and private garages hid the hotel guests' vehicles from view as well. Caine's taxi pulled over across the street from the hotel. The driver gave Caine a knowing smile and a wink. "좋은 밤 보내세요," he said. "Have a good night." Everyone in Korea knew exactly what such hotels were for. And while there was no shame associated with visiting one, as a lone foreigner, Caine knew the driver most likely assumed he was paying for his evening's entertainment. Caine ignored the man's leer and handed him several won notes. As the driver counted his change, Caine peered through the window at the building. Crimson neon letters hung along the side of the glossy black structure, facing toward the street. The word hotel was written in English, but the rest of the characters were Korean. The landscaped sidewalks and walking paths surrounding the hotel were devoid of pedestrians. There was a pharmacy around the corner, and a few parked cars lined the street. Their interiors were dark, with no signs of passengers inside. Chan's car and driver were nowhere to be seen. Chan probably sent the driver home, Caine thought. He was planning to be here for a while. Caine took his change and exited the vehicle, keeping his fingers wrapped around the grip of the pistol in his coat pocket. The wind sent a shiver down his spine as he approached the eerily quiet hotel. All his instincts, all his years of experience screamed in the back of his mind. Death lurked in the hotel's penthouse suite, either his own or someone else's. He entered the glass-enclosed lobby, his footsteps clicking across the marble tile floor. The front desk was unmanned, and he ignored the blinking automated check-in machine. He already had a key that could access any room in the hotel. As the elevator doors slid open, Caine glanced up and noticed his reflection in the dome of a security camera. Judging by the dust covering the smoked plastic dome and the loose wires hanging out the back of the tiny device, he doubted it still functioned. He entered the elevator and swiped his card across the terminal. Then he pushed the button marked P. Chan always booked the penthouse suite for his rendezvous with Lee. Tonight was no exception. The elevator car rumbled as it moved up the building. Caine ejected the magazine from his pistol and checked the load. The NIS had assigned him the small concealed carry model of the weapon. Unlike the full-size model, its magazine only held 10 shots, of which he had 3 remaining, including a round in the chamber. He slapped a fresh mag in the weapon and stuffed the old one in his coat pocket. The elevator doors slid open with a chime. Caine stepped out, sweeping his gun left and right. He was alone in the tiny alcove. Soft pink carpet covered the floor, matted down by years of foot traffic. A row of white marble statues lined a shelf on the wall opposite the elevator. They resembled Greek gods, entwined in various lewd positions. Caine moved into the corridor. There was only a single door at the end of the hall. It was carved from dark brown wood and marked with a gold plaque that read Penthouse. The door was open just a crack, and the room beyond was dark and silent. Caine eased the door open with his foot. The hinges made a quiet creak. Caine winced at the sound, but he heard nothing else in the room. He entered the dark space, staying close to the outer wall. As he swept his gun around the room, his eyes adjusted to the dim light. The twinkling lights of the Seoul skyline glimmered like stars through the room's panoramic windows. The Lotte World Tower dwarfed the surrounding buildings. It rose over 500 meters, a spear of metal and glass outlined with purple lights, thrusting up into the ebony night sky. Unlike the love hotels he had seen in Japan, the Hotel Strawberry's penthouse featured no extravagant or unusual decor. It had a modern industrial design with concrete walls, exposed air conditioning ducts, and hardwood floors. The furniture was all mid-century style and various shades of brown leather. A well-stocked bar, complete with counter and stools, filled the eastern wall. Glass bottles of high-end liquor sparkled in the shadows, reflecting the lights beyond the window like jade and amber gems. Caine froze in place, clenching his pistol in a white-knuckled grip. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he spotted two bodies, a man and a woman, sprawled face down on a leather couch in the center of the room. The woman's long black hair flowed over her face, obscuring her features. Someone had slid her dress open down the back, revealing her pale skin. Zip ties secured her arms behind her. Caine advanced toward the body, glancing in the shadows to make sure he was alone in the room. He kneeled on the floor and brushed the woman's hair aside with the barrel of his pistol. It was Sumi. Her cheeks had a pale bluish tint, and her eyes gaped open, their pupils two tiny black pinpricks. She was dead. Dead because you got played, he thought. The other corpse was Jae-yoon. His leather jacket draped across the floor, and his shirt was slit down the back as well. Caine narrowed his eyes as he examined the two bodies. The skin between their shoulders